So we were talking about up till now, how is it possible for the Baal Tshuva to transform from something that is in Shalsuf Satmeis, and he can turn even Zdoinos, even something that is intentional sins, and he can turn it into Kiddush. We explained that the difference between mitzvahs, or the level of Baal Tshuva versus the level of Tzaddikim, Tshuva reaches to the level of Baal Harotz. Baal Harotz is the level that transcends and is the source of the Ratzon of Torah mitzvahs. Because it transcends and is higher than that, it's not limited. It's that aspect of Hashem that's not limited in Torah mitzvahs. And therefore, even if a person Chas v'Shalom transgresses, and from the perspective of Hashem's Ratzon, from the perspective of Hashem's will, so it seems to be as if this is good and this is bad, and there's no changing it. But when you're dealing with Baal HaRatzon, he's going to explain soon, those limitations are the Eibishter could change according to what he sees fit. Let's learn line 18. Hine Tzadat Musi is Barach, from the perspective of Hashem's very essence, it says that when Hashem first created the world, he did not know which ones does he desire. Does he desire in the Maseim Shel Tzadikim, the Chazal say? Does he desire the actions of Tzadikim? Or, Chas v'Shalom, does he desire the actions of others? So, Ella, Shebachar, Hashem, in the end, he chose, Bebchira Chafshis, it was free choice. Nobody, this wasn't something that Hashem was obligated and forced to do. Lias Chafetz Masem Tzaddik, to desire the actions of Tzaddik. But Meluloi Shach Shatil is Doinus, this is Malcolm Gabov. Therefore, it's not possible that the intentional sins should have any significance in comparison to Hashem. And they should have the capability, from his perspective, to conceal the godly sparks or the sparks of holiness that are found in them. When a person chooses something entirely freely, and he gives preference of A over B, but there's nothing that forces him to do so, because there's nothing about A that really forces the person. Therefore, I have the freedom to maneuver this. I have the freedom to change this around. Hashem shows that mitzvahs are good, and the opposite of mitzvahs are not. So the very same Eibishter does that can decide based on the avoid of tshuva. Now we could take those sparks of godliness that are concealed in the what's not good and elevate it and to transform it in kedusha. Why? Because what's good and not good, all these things, because he chose them, are not something that could limit him, chas v'shalom. Baal Harotz, in the level of the master of the will, where the source of the will of Torah mitzvahs comes from. She'eina nitfeses b'rotz in the Torah mitzvahs, top of page Yud Aleph. It's not limited by, it's not grasped, it's not set only in the will of Torah mitzvahs. So that level of Baal Harotz, and the master of the will, the one that possesses the will, the Sheches Dafkai the Avodah Tshuva, comes down specifically through the Avodah of Tshuva. Hainu, this means tzaddikim afilu elu shegilu dargas oivdei Hashem ba'avarav b'tanugim, such tzaddikim, that even those high tzaddikim that reach to a level that they serve Hashem with a great delight, love of Hashem, with a great love of delight, even sheyesh lam tainug ba'avodasam, since they are enjoying, they have delight in their service. They are in a state, they are in a level of there is some type of mitzias over here, some type of existence. They are a yesh. They still have some personhood, some ego. I love Hashem. Metzias the kedusha. True, it's holy, but it's a metzias of holiness. Since they are metzias, they cannot tap into Hashem's level of balarotzen. Since they are coming and approaching Hashem with their being, with their existence, so their existence can only reach the level of Hashem's will, not Hashem the way He transcends the will, Hashem's very essence, the balarotzen. As opposed to Baal Tshuva, since their service is an approach of nullifying that they're dissatisfied with their state and situation. They are tearing themselves away from it. That's their situation, that's their attitude, that's their approach. As it says, Asura Mikan, the Chazal say concerning where it says about Moshe Rabbeinu, that when he saw the snare, it says that the Asura Mikan, Liskadav Lasham, I will move away from here to approach over there. But the movement of a Baal Tshuva is primarily the focus on tearing themselves away from the negativity they were involved with earlier. So therefore, that's a great state of bittul. That bittul taps in much higher than the level of tzaddikim, which don't have that level of bittul of the Baal Tshuva. And therefore, they draw down the level of the master of the will, that in the master of the will, then you could have the change and the transformation of something that's zdoinos, and to elevate the sparks of zdoinos, and to be able to turn it into zachias. And now we're going to understand what it says earlier. That we had the question, if the purpose of Arur Haman is to transform it into Baruch Mordechai, and therefore, essentially, if one looks at it in its true essence, even the Haman is the same level like Mordechai. So what's the idea that it says, that the person is so intoxicated that they do not differentiate, they do not know to differentiate between cursed as Haman and blessed as Mordechai. According to what we said earlier in the Maimer that Rebbe asked, they're on the same level. There's not, they're not missing anything in their knowledge. But according to the Maimer Chazal, Adela Yada doesn't know, that means that they are missing something in their knowledge, even though they perceive it as Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai being the same. So what are they missing? What is the differentiation between Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai? Based on what we just now said, we'll see that the differentiation is the level of bittul that's l'mayla matam v'das. That's the Arur Haman. In the simple reading, Ad la yada ben Arur Haman l'Baruch Mordechai, Haman is lower than Mordechai. But since here we're talking about that the Arur Haman is the purpose, he sees the purpose in the Arur Haman. Is the v'nafeichu, is the transformation of Klippa into Kedusha, and that's what he looks at as Arur Haman. So that is also not on the same level like Baruch Mordechai. Instead, it's higher. That's what's the Lo Yada. But also Lo Yada, he explains over here from the word bittul. The Arur Haman, the transformation, reaches and reveals the level of bittul that reaches the highest level. Let's see it inside. Line 11. Zel Pirush HaMaimer, this is the explanation of what the Chazal say. Ad Lo Yada, until he does not know. In Arur Haman Baruch Mordechai, between Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai, this power to transform Klippa into Kedusha, it only comes about through the avodah of Lo Yada. What's Lo Yada means? He doesn't know. In other words, beyond knowledge, beyond understanding, beyond self. It's a bittul beyond reason and knowledge. Only this level of bittul of Ad Lo Yada helps him tap into and reaches the level of Hashem's essence, the Balarotzen, that says, I do not know which I desire, the actions of tzaddikim or the others. From there comes out the idea and the concept of to transform the cursed as Haman to Mordechai is blessed. let's wait with the questions till the end of the mimer. I want to see if we could conclude this mimer today. Now we're going to go back to another thing that he said in the footnote in the comment of the Tzemach Tzedek on the Alter Rebbe's mimer. And he said that the idea of Torah being mashal akadmoini, and we explained that whole idea about the mashal concealing and becoming revealed at Ein Sof and so on. Similar for Nafek and Purim, is the Tzemach Tzedek says that he makes the note and says, like it's explained in the Maimer of Purim. That with this we could explain why the Tzemach Tzedek says that as it's brought down the Maimer of Purim, and we mentioned that why does he make such a type of note? Usually when the Rabbeim point out a Maimer, they say the title of the Maimer. The Tzemach Tzedek himself, many times on the Torah, when he's constantly pointing out, look up this Maimer, look up that Maimer, he'll say, as it says in the Maimer, with the Dibra Maskal, the title, Pasuk, so and so. So the Tzemach Tzedek doesn't do that over here. He doesn't say, look up the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe entitled Chayav Inish L'Psumah B'Purim. No, he says, look up the Maimer of Purim, Drush Purim. What does that mean? The Maimer that he's referring to, the Maimer of Purim, that's the Maimer that begins with this Maimer Chazal that a person is obligated till he does not know. And he calls it with the name and just Drush Purim. There's many Mamorim that speak about Purim of the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim. So why? So we see a very interesting point that Rebbe says over here. By calling this Maimer, the Maimer of Chayav Inish L'Psumah B'Purim, he calls it the Maimer of Purim. That indicates and teaches us that which Maimer embodies the message of Purim, that's the Maimer of Chayav Inish L'Psumah. Lefi shebemitzvah zu, because or not the Maimer, or the mitzvah of Ad Lo Yada, with that is Mizbate Inyan HaPurim, expresses itself the idea of Purim. So why doesn't he say, okay, the Maimer of Chayav Inish L'Psumah Purim? He asks in note for 41. But if you would have just had the title like any other title of a Maimer, you wouldn't know that it's something special. By calling this Maimer Drush Purim, you know that the idea of Chayav Inish L'Psumah is an expression of the whole idea of Purim. The Ad Lo Yad is an expression of the entire idea of Purim. Top of page Yud Beis, that the intention of the Tzemach Tzedek is to hit L'Shnei Hanyan Shua Purim, the two aspects and components of Purim. Heina Avoida V'Afichas Arer Ham L'Baruch Mark, both the Avoida of transforming and making Arer Haman into Baruch Marchai. The Heina Nisinus Koyach Alzeh, but also the empowerment and the capability. How are we able to do that? How do we have Bein Ahar Hamla Baruch Mordechai through Layada, through the avoid of Bittul? Like it's explained in that very Maimer that the Tzemach Tzedek points to. What does it mean, Ad Layada? Who al Shaydei Mesiris Nefesh Shalamayla Ma'adas, through the self-sacrifice. That's beyond reason. One reaches the very essence of the infinite light of Hashem. Then, in regards to Hashem's very essence, everything is equal. And again, if everything is equal, there are no limitations. This is a mitzvah, this is not a mitzvah, this is a tzaddik, this is not a tzaddik. He could turn it all over. That what is the similarity and what's corresponding to that in what we said before about Mishal HaKadmoini, who inyan ha'pa'ula behelam ha'mashal. It's like we said before, we need to take the mashal, which by its very nature the mashal conceals, because a person could think that all the mashal is only the mashal. You don't know that there's an imshal. Just like a person could think when they're learning nigla of Torah that that's all it is. They don't realize there's something deeper behind. Instead, one needs to transform the mashal to make it a vessel for the earlier one, for that which preceded the world. And the empowerment for this through the idea of self-sacrifice. It comes from the essence of the soul, it's beyond intellect. Like it's explained previously in Ois Beis at length, that when it comes from the level of the essence of the soul, then it's possible to reach that and transform and see even in the revealed part of Torah, the Pnimius of Torah. Ois Dalet. Yes, if we're going to add in this idea of transforming darkness to light, to transform the Arham to Baruch March. Whether we're talking about in the learning of the Nigla Taidam, in the Mashal, Shagam, Helam, Amashal, also the concealment of the Nigla should be a vessel for the one that preceded the worlds. The room is Gamba possibly such as Malach is also hinted in that pasuk of Leisachis Melach that the Maimer of the Torah begins with. Like to explain the Torah concerning the soul, that flavors the meat. The root of meat is min adam shebalev, from the blood that's in the heart. It's the attribute of the animal soul. One needs to transform it from one extreme to the other. And to be able to do that transformation, to change the emotions of the Nefesh Ba'amis, you need to have salt. Salt is in the Pnimius HaTorah, voice of Leviathan, and he adds to explain the reason why salt is called the bris of Elikecha. What's the idea of Shem Elikim over here? The root of judgments and bitterness comes from the name Elikim. That the name Elikim, since it has 5 letters can have 120 different combinations you can make from 5 letters. That they come down by chain descent till the end of the world of Asiya. From them, there is correspondingly 120 combinations in the world of Klippas Noiga, that they nurse their life force and energy from the 120 combinations that there is of the name Elokim. If you add 120 and 120, you have 240. 240 is the numerical equivalent of the word mar, bitter. So when you have Shem Elokim by Seder Ishtalshus meeting up with Klippas Noiga, then you have mar Chas V'Shalom. Seipam Kufchaf, twice 120. Ukechesh ben Amalek. Amalek is also the numerical equivalent of 220. Hamakir the Arhaman. Amalek is the source of the whole Arham, top of page Gimel. Melech Mamtik Sadinim, and the salt sweetens the judgments. Inyan Amrir is this idea of bitterness. So in other words, it transforms the Klippa Hanal. How? Because it says, there's a lashon we have in Tanya and other places of Chassidus, that the severity, the judgments can only be sweetened by its source and by its root. So if you want to counter the negative effect that happened when the Ishtalshus of Shem Elokim came down and met up with Klippas Noiga, and therefore gave birth to Tamar and Amalek and Arhaman, so you need to go back to the root, to the Gvuras, the way they are in Kedusha, the Shem Elokim. Therefore it says, Bris Elikecha, this melach, this salt that sweetens the meat, that transforms the negative of Nefesh Bahamis, is how do you do so? You have to go to Elikecha, to Shem Elokim, the way it's in its root, the way it is before it descended into Klippas Noiga, to be able to affect that transformation. We can add and connect this with the general parsha of Vayikra. In many years, we read parts of Vayikra on the Shabbos that's close to Purim. Usually, when it's a kviyas of a Shana Muberes. when it's two others. And Zem moving from this understood, Parshas Vayikra, Merumez Minyanov Malos shall put him, it's hinted in it from the ideas and the quality and the advantage of Purim, as we know that the Parsha of the week that Rebbe always brings down from, I think it's the Shalom, that the Parsha of the week has to do with the Yom Tovim that fall out in that week. So that all this that we spoke about, the advantages and milos of Purim, must be hinted in Parsha Vayikra as well. The Rebbe mentioned a very interesting, if you will, like, I don't know how to call it, not really contradiction, maybe contrast between the beginning of Parsha Vayikra and the end of Parsha Vayikra. Here, let's call this a Parsha. Vayikra al Moshe, the beginning of the Parsha is Hashem called the Moshe, like Rashi explained, whenever it says Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe, or it says Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, or it says Tzav, all of these things, Hashem, prior to that, he called Moshe. What does calling indicate? Lashon Chibah, it's an expression of love, as opposed to the nations that over there that Hashem just appeared in a happenstance way. Vayikra indicates that Hashem's love for Moshe and the Yid. Now, the very fact that the Chazal say that all of these things in Torah were preceded by an expression of love of Hashem for the Jewish people. So like the Rebbe always says, something that precedes in time also indicates that it's preceding in quality as well. I knew this means line 11, Shezeu Inyan Shekoidem V'Naila Yoser. This is something that's preceding. And even higher, Kedima Loidak Bezman Al V'Gamba Mailam, it's proceeding not only in time, but also in advantage and quality, Mikola Dibris, from all that which was spoken, Amiris, everything that was said, B'Tzivuim, and the commands from the Torah. So that Hashem's love for the Jewish people is something that's higher even than Hashem's mitzvahs in the Torah. Moving down Masha Kosu, like it's also in the Sitchmo, it says, by Yikra Stam. It says he called, it doesn't say who. It doesn't say Havaya called. When it comes to the Diburim and Amiris, when it talks about the commands of the Torah, when it talks about the halachas, the mitzvah of the Torah, it says Havaya spoke, Havaya said. Why? Because this calling, which is out of love, comes from Hashem himself, the way it's even higher than the name Yud Kei Vav. It was not hinted in any letter, etc. That is the beginning of the parsha. Hashem's unbelievable love that comes from his very essence. Now let's look at the end of the parsha. The conclusion of the parsha is B'nefesh kisechta, a soul that will sin. Now, in general, the Karbanis is talking about sins that are committed unintentionally, because an intentional sin, in the majority of times, Karbanis are not applicable. But the parsha does also include such a case of an intentional sin. Not just an unintentional sin, which is the majority of cases where Karbanis are obligated, even an intentional sin. This category of sin is called that he did a me'ilah, he did like a rebellion, an opposition, something against Hashem's very nature, or Hashem's very being, Rahman al-Islam. Begam shvu al sheker, it's also a false oath. Also, the final words of the parsha is to be guilty in it. In the movement, seemingly it's not understood. So the name of a parsha is not just because those are the first few words of the Seder, so we call it that. But like the Rebbe always says, bringing from Alter Rebbe Shari Yichud, the name of something is the life force of all of the things. As Elamoid al Toichin Kala Parsha Alasiyuma. The name Vayikra indicates the entire content of the parsha until its conclusion. Va'adrab, and even more so, it's not just also till the conclusion. Since there's the rule that the beginning is staked out in the end, and the end is staked out in the beginning. So there's a unique connection, a special connection between the beginning and the end of the parsha. The Echi talking Shatevis Lashma Bahim Siyum parts by Yikra. How is it possible that the words Lashma is the conclusion of parts by Yikra Lashon Chiba, an expression of love? Ach, Ingen, who the idea behind this is, Shai Ingen the Lashma Bah Meir Allah's Doinus, and the Fachim was Chuyas Ideva Chiper Garder Vanisla. The idea of the Karbonis is to get the atonement and forgiveness. So we're talking here not about the concept of bad, but we're talking about intentional sins that are being transformed into mitzvahs. Is the true atonement and forgiveness is when the intentional sins become transformed into merit. With this is expressed the true love of Hashem to the Yidden that precedes the Torah, like we said before. This idea that the Baal Tshuva is able to transform the negative into positive comes from the Baal Rotzen that's higher than the Rotzen. The Hashem's very essence that precedes the Torah. Hashem's love for the Jewish people that precedes his wanting the Torah. Even when a Jewish person transgresses the mitzvah Torah and acts like Esav Chas v'Shalom, then also, and despite that, I love Yankov, Shabbat, that's in him. That we say, even though from the Eibishter's essence, we say, from the essential perspective of the Eibishter, he says, I do not know which one I want. Similar to that, it says in the Pasuk, is Esav not a brother to Yankov? Showing that the brotherhood indicates seemingly Esav and Yankov are the same. But what does the pasuk conclude? Even though Ach Esav Yankov, he never oyeves Yankov as Esav. Still in all, I love Yankov and I hate Esav. Kadosh Baruch Hu, even because of his love for Yankov, which supersedes everything, he atones and forgives the person's guilt. Till the intentional affairs become mitzvahs. Through that, we reach the general idea of transforming darkness to light and bitter to sweet. With the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, very soon, speedily, with Simchas Olam al Rosham, an everlasting joy upon their heads. Any questions?